Hey, good evening, everyone. Yeah, we thought, apart from having sessions around your technical and more your functional parts of your business, uh, having the ability to probably have a conversation with your startups who have seen or who have been a part of your journey that that you are facing right now. It'd be a great space to probably learn, ask, clarify any question that you have in mind, right? So for the first session in your founder series, we have your Sohail here from your Zero Cow Factory. Sohail, over to you. Please to introduce yourself. You talk about your own journey, introduction to the organization. Why did you find the need to start this organization to begin with?
Yeah, sure, Siddharth, and thanks GFI for inviting. Always pleasure to be here. Uh, so Zero Cow Factory was actually a not easy journey, but when we started about early 2020 with the deep take and the research, and we found this space is really excited. But uh, at that moment, we were the first Asian, not only Indian, company who started working on precision fermentation or cellular agriculture to create animal-free proteins. So idea was basically my profile is basically I don't come with a biotech background actually or life science background, right? But I built startups before, and during COVID, I was looking for based on the personal interest on climate, animal welfare, and also I mean certain things are already happening in largely in the West, right? For quite some time in alternative protein space. So that was a moment where I wanted to start my third startup venture, and I found a problem is a really big with respect to climate, nutritional value, sustainability, and also animal welfare, right? So India being the largest dairy production and consumption country, right? But we don't produce enough protein, and even today, 80% of the Indian population is protein deficient. Right. So this is a big problem to solve, looking at multiple aspects. So, and technically, what we are trying to build was impossible 10 years ago. A lot of pharma, biotech companies who have tried, they had a huge talent, capital, everything, right? So this was a really tough call to make certain things as a proof of concept or minimum viable product, right? To prove the technology. So that was the idea, and it was super risky at that moment of time because when we started with the first in Asia, even we lead the space today in Asia, and with respect to certain protein also. So that was the point where we have taken that bet on us uh, to get into this because we knew the problem is bigger, and this is the only way to solve multiple problems going ahead, right? So and I was always looking at not a typical problem solving for or the solution basically for a decade. We wanted to solve really food problem and the solution basically transformation for the next century kind of a thing, right? Because even if you look at the UN data and certain things, the traditional agriculture won't last, right? After some decades, right? Because of lack of land, water, natural resources, right? And ever-growing population with the limited resources, right? So there's definitely a huge transformation is required where we will see the next century how the food production will happen, and mainly because based on the synthetic biology, right? So mm, so that's why I mean journey was not easy, but we were very focused. We knew what we wanted to build, how we wanted to build it, how we wanted to create our defensibility. And being in India, the India is all about IT, right? So getting into the research, right? Getting the funding, right? Without revenue is absolutely difficult or almost impossible because we don't have climate funds or funds who back long-term gestation startups like in biotech or the life science space, right? So that is always challenge to operate into this alternative protein space, especially into cellular agriculture, precision fermentation or cell based from the India because it's very nascent even today, correct? But few countries lead the space like US, Israel, Singapore, right? with respect to ecosystem maturity and the development of the fundraising. So that was always a challenge, but I think we were very focused. We knew how we wanted to proceed, right? And fortunately, we have closed highest seed round of $4 million also last year. So that makes us to get into a lot of validations that yes, we have did right things, right? But still, it's a start, and we need to achieve more things in the near future.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. So, yeah, quickly going to the point you mentioned about, you know, it's been around 3 years now since you just started this organization, right? You mentioned 2020 is when you initiated the organization. So back in 2020, you would have probably thought about the attraction for your own organization or what all you would have possibly achieved 3 years down the line, right? And there might have been some things which have worked, and some things which you probably did not, right? So how did you manage that? Just maybe also you talk through what worked and what didn't work. You're looking back, was there something that you could have you probably done differently, or even thought about it a little differently?
Yeah, so definitely when we started, or even on a first day, we were very clear because we wanted to be a global company, right? That's a long-term vision. And being in India, basically, but getting into some defensibility because there are some mature startups who have raised multi-million dollars, right? Already unicorn, getting into IPO, right? And few products are already available in the Singapore and US already, right? So we wanted to make sure that how we can make a difference, right, at a global stage. So in that case, I think if you really look at alternative protein space and not majorly plant-based, right? Because plant-based may there are a lot of challenge with respect to fundraising because there is no technology or science, right, which investors or the VCs at least expect, right? Because plant-based thing is still in nascent stage, right? But if you look at the US, Oatly and all are like 20-year-old companies, right? But majorly the fund, it's a high capital idea always to work in alternative protein, right? And so technology plays a very different and important role here. So getting into the IP patents is, I think, very much important always to think about how we are planning, right? So it is not just a product development or how you are going with which product, which market, right? Because regulatory for novel ingredient is again a big challenge, right? It's a cumbersome process. So and scale up is again challenge. So you can do one thing at a time, right? But highly, it's even if you ask Zero Factory, we are not a food company, we are a technology company, always. And that is what we would continue. And so that's how when we started with the most complex protein like a casein, right? So few players who lead the space as early adopters in this space, they tried, they failed, right? So learning from them and getting into our own defensibility so that we can get our own IP patents, right? That's opportunity actually. So we started with the most complex thing as a challenge, and we have proved at a lab scale first some proof of concept MVP, right, to build our team in confidence. uh, and that is the point where uh, if certain validations are there, then you can think about the scale up or what could be the next plan, right, in terms of the scale up or how much yield or how you are planning next big thing with respect to, let's say, bioreactors or anything. So that was a plan, and once you have some validations and thing which are clear that what should be your next milestone, right, as a startup, then it makes easy for getting into the raising capitals, right, getting some partners, incubation program, acceleration programs, right? So so the journey is difficult being into India. If someone is in the US or something, it is easy to get some $1 million funding also from university or some incubation, right? So initially also, if you look at, we found really big challenges with top Indian even university or the colleges for the incubation and acceleration, because they did not understood our vision, or they don't have actually the even kind of a vision or a technology, at least acceptance, right? So, so that maturity actually even lacks today, because if you look at really, there are not much options with respect to how you wanted to start with any supporting partner, right? To start with, let's say incubation, and once you grow, maybe you startup will look after for acceleration program. So many of the really good organizations in India, I can't share the names, but they said this is impossible, what you are trying to build. Right. So that mindset is a big problem, which we've found initially, and that's how we started with looking after outside India, largely in terms of getting some programs who have the relevance, they understand the problem statement, and they can better support to us. So Milky Butter was the first Spanish program backed by the dairy company called Pascual, and they selected about a global 4 startups, and we are the first Asian startup selected in the first cohort. That was actually the cellular agriculture first incubation program for alternative protein.
And this
So,
was in which year was this?
so this was in the year around 21-22, where
21.
uh, they were not finding enough startups in this space, and this was like very much traditional, big Pascual as a food group who wanted to get into the sustainability, and they launched such programs. And this program was in Madrid, Spain. After that, we started looking out for acceleration program, the same issue we found, and we got into one of the top alternative protein startup in Mass Challenge, Switzerland. So we attended acceleration program in Lausanne, Switzerland, because this program was very much relevant, because this such programs are backed by the food companies, global, like a
Mm.
Nestle, Buller, Jivadon, right? So these things are actually we have the limitation in India, right? We don't see such high vision plans with respect to even corporates, right? Who wanted to back getting into the partnership and also fundraising. So that was a point where we did acceleration outside India, but we are doing our innovation in India. And then also we got into top 12 food startups based out of San Francisco, the program called Plug and Play.
Mm.
So because they understand this space, it is very easy for startup and them also to getting into the right problem statement, what we are building, what help is required. So that mindset is very much important, because still even today I can say India is still very much nascent stage in terms of everything. Because what we
Yeah.
build, we are trying to build using, let's say, technology. There is no education, right? Even
Mm.
at a global scale, right? So we need to create our own innovation, because there is no data multiple times. Many times there is no protocol, right? There is not much strain which has been gone into a lot of discovery, right? But that is the fun and opportunity to create IP, patents, and differentiating factors. So that is always the core uh, objective of Zero Cow Factory, to make innovation and innovation, which is very much, I mean, first time always, whatever we do, we believe that we should have the first mover advantage.
No, so I completely agree with yeah, with most of yeah what you're saying, right? Like when you're talking about innovation in its your truest form, yeah, sometimes the push back is going to be the hardest. Uh, but it's about you're proving yourself also right in a lot of these spaces. So from a since also you started this entire journey in India, right? Uh, you're talking me through your either your support system that existed in India, or just the initial your support that you got to maybe make this a little more real.
I can say support system is a big problem in India. As any startup will look after for the incubation as a first step, right? Largely, right. But if you look at this space where you need a lot of high capital investment, let's say laboratory, you need a particular uh, equipments, right? Let's say for an example, the fermenter for the food works very differently. Even it is a precision fermentation, if it is a cell-based fermenter, right? There's a specific sensors and specific processes required, which is far away and different from the pharma or biotech companies. So if you look at, there are support system. I know I'm in GFI, I'm in closely working for, I'm from our initial days, even today, right? But apart from GFI, I don't think much where you can get relevance with respect to any incubation program, any laboratory where you can start, initiate your work with a minimum cost. So this is a even big problem even today, because every startup is different. Their maybe technology or their expectation with respect to equipments or certain things are very different. And also the knowledge base and
mm,
the skills. That is also very much difficult in this space. As I told you, I mean, even if someone is working fermentation for the last 20, 30 years in a large corporate pharma or biotech, but they're not able to work what we are trying to achieve because they haven't
mm,
worked on certain strains. They haven't worked on food ingredient, right, as end product. So it is absolutely sometimes the experience also doesn't help, right? Because this is quite challenging space, but although there is no data, right, and we need to challenge I mean ourselves in terms of cracking that code, right, and moving ahead. So support system, I think, is a big problem. I know, I mean, GFI is doing really good job for a couple of years, right, with respect to policymakers, universities, colleges, incubation centers, but still I think way to go in terms of getting that maturity, right advisors in this space, right mentorship in this space, right investors in this space who can strategically help, right, to get the startup to the next level.
yeah. No, so I think the brighter your side of it, and you correctly you pointed out like the nascency of the sector is quite obvious or quite evident, right? But there are far more people who are talking about it today, which leads to hope that there will be traction in the space soon enough. So, yeah, before we open it up to the audience out here, one, what would be your recommendation to the startups in this space, right? If you're looking for experts, mentors, um, how do they go about doing this? And I'm talking about startups maybe today, where you were in probably a 2020, right? It could be just an ideation
Yeah,
stage. Yeah, go on.
sure. So I think even when we started almost 3.5 years ago, right, or even today, I don't think the space has moved very fast. Not many successful startups in this space, not many fundraising news or really breakthrough from India at least, right? And I have seen personally even some of the startups who are associated with GFI, right? Always the suggestion, or I mean, they have taken some hard steps to register in US and Singapore because the problem is there's a high capital and startup always works in agile way. Without capital biotech, you can't build a business. It is as simple as that. So I've seen personally few startups in this space right away from India in last 1 or 2 years. They have registered their company in the US and Singapore largely, right? To just get first few dollars. Because in India, the bigger challenge is that without a revenue, even to raise 1 rupee, right, it is very difficult.
Hmm. Okay.
So, so there is specific, if you look at the alternative protein fund or any climate funds or a deep tech funds, right? They do really don't understand this space or they really don't want to build thesis across. It is very nascent for them also, and they don't have the expertise as a fund today. So these are the a couple of things where certain startups found themselves key, okay, being in India is important or registering the company outside India. But there is a pros and cons, right? So we always had a choice key to get into US or Singapore, right? But we were
Hmm.
very clear that I don't think if we are doing a right problem solving or if we build real IP and the technology adoption, we were very clear that I think we will not move outside India, right? Like other startups have already done it to just raise $500,000 or $1 million, right? But after that, what? I know the startups are struggling to get next level of fundraising or getting the next growth because
Hmm.
then I think expectation with respect to growth, you need a larger capital and proper venture capital or the institutional funds, right? Who can strategically come and they can write a big check and they can wait for 10 years because alternate burden is not a quick game, right? Because investors always think in India that 5 to 7 years is a like normal time for their exit. But this space is technology development at a lab scale also takes certain times 3 to 4 years. Then scale up is again 3 to 4 year journey, right? Then regulatory also, when we started, only one country was allowed. Now 5 countries, including India, is allowing, right? So definitely potential is there, but uh, it's a long gestation. I think even the business where someone should bet for 8 to 10 years, right? Someone should wait in terms of the return as an investor. So that definitely lacks in India. because that kind of a strategic funds with a longer period of time and the belief in this kind of a thesis is absolutely missing today. And that's how, but we're very clear that we know if we are solving a right problem and if we are building a right technology, we can convince investors not only in India but outside also with respect to deep tech, climate, or right who wanted to get into, right. So there are couple of, not many, but deep tech funds in India, including let's say Pi Ventures, right. So their success rate is not even 0.1% many times because they just back about 2 3 startups every year. So getting into their radar, getting that thesis development or why they should back, right. But that was really critical, but we made it because we should understand why the investor will come, right, what is they are looking at, right, and we should make ourselves ready with respect to that. And I think then the deep tech funds in India, so we have the two VCs from India, we have the VCs from US, Australia, Hong Kong, and Spain, right. So we have the six institutional topper VCs, not only outside India but in India also, but it is very new space for them also, so it has taken a time, right, for them to understand.
Mm,
And many times just to understand the 10% of the technology, they have taken about 3 to 4 months time just to discuss with us. And as a founders, we always there to help them out to build their thesis, right, end of the day. And it requires a lot of time, right, as a founders to raise first check. I think it is on personal interests and the experience also, I can tell you that 90% of the founders time should go in the fundraising for the first check because that is required.
thanks. I'll take a pause here. Yeah, Purusha, can we add the questions of people who've been asking your questions onto the call?
Yeah, you can see it in the Q&A box. We can read it out considering it's an anonymous question.
Okay. So yeah, your question, one is how does your positioning as a deep tech startup impact your fundraising pitch?
uh, Being in India, I think every fund say we wanted to back deep tech, but that is not true. Correct. If you are in the alternative protein space, right? No deep tech fund has backed any startups or there is a data, right? So fortunately, unfortunately, deep tech in India is all about AI, ML, and IoT, right? So if you look, I don't know which deep tech investors or the fund you are talking about, but if you really wanted to get into the deep tech, right? So this is really rocket science. We are in the speed, right? Where to build a rocket simply, right? You need a fund and rocket will be ready at least after 5 or 7 years, right? And when you are ready to launch that rocket, and if it is successful or not successful, we need to have 5 to 7 years journey. A lot of capital is required. So in India, a lot of deep tech funds doesn't understand beyond the SaaS industry, e-commerce industry, or the fintech industry, right? So, but if you look at largely into the West and the Europe, there are deep tech funds with respect to they can wait 10, 15 years in terms of the return. They have some thesis, specific funds where they have deep tech investment across only climate tech. So we have one seed round may invest called Green Frontier Capital. So Green Frontier Capital is actually based out of US, but they are one of the first venture capital firm who have now launched India specific fund for the startups in India. And their thesis is very clear that if you are working with respect to sustainability or climate, right? And food is a big problem within sustainability, right? So they have that thesis. They have done investment in this space outside India, largely in the US and Singapore, right? So they have that maturity enough, and they've just recently launched in India as well. So it is really deep tech or whatever the sustainability climate fund where you have the relevance, right? So you should not blindly approach any deep tech fund, right? They will say deep tech, but end of the day, it's if, just look at their portfolio. It must be a SaaS or some AI companies, right? So if that is clear, then I think it is very much relevance in terms of not only uh, for as a founders or even investors, right? To understand the problem statement or something. So it is not blind where we should apply to any fund, right? If some fund only invest into some deep tech with respect to let's say finance or some area, for an example, so that is really red flag in terms of starting a discussion with them. It will not work, correct? Because the fund should have the thesis right? And even in tip tech today, I can see even Pi Ventures who have backed us, or Green Frontier Capital from the US who backed us. They are ESG funds basically. So that is also very much important, that ESG is work on environment and all, right? So they have their LPs, limited partners, and the fund who have the very strong belief and the thesis to invest in ESG and sustainable startups across the globe, right? So that is more important, I think, as a pitch. Don't blindly apply. And another beautiful and a very much tough call which we had taken earlier is that we knew we need larger capital. This is not something where we are building any startup or the D2C brand where we should start with the angel round, right? Where we can raise maybe 1 crore to 5 crore. No, it will not work, because if you look at the global data and compare yourself with a global startup in this space, they have raised multi-billion dollar even at R&D stage, right? So even we found a way where we did not found any angel investor who is relevant to us in terms of the strategy, right? So capital is not everything. You need to find a relevant investor, and in that case, we have skipped our first round with angel investor, because angel investors just generally, even VC doesn't have the thesis or the understanding how come the angel investor will back this idea. There are a lot of angel investors who will say, "Okay, I can come with a small check. I'm personally interested on alternative protein, but what next? Can they help you to raise next round? Can they strategically involve with the startup to get to the next technology advancement or something to raise? Because this idea, where I think 1 crore, 2 crore will not help, right? This space where you need literally multi-million dollar checks and strategic investors. And that's how even we did a pre-seed with Brink from Hong Kong, who understand this space as a food accelerator, and Artisan from Australia, who back alternative protein and food tech startup. And it's a very large 1 billion EM fund, right? So even for the smaller checks, we have we are very choosy basically. Even we rejected some investors while we were raising our initial rounds, because I think more relevance is that not capital is everything, right? But someone is coming with a capital, but they can help you out with the next fundraise or in your growth, right? How the global connects or the thesis they have. So I mean, startup is different again, but you can have very clear that next 3 5 years how you wanted to proceed, how much money you need, who could be your right investors, right? So in our case, there was absolute reason that we had skipped angel investing.
So, very interesting your question that's come up is this, right? So, do you think corporate partnerships will be a viable exit for your precision information or your fermentation companies like yours, especially if the bigger conventional milk brands maybe want to pivot in this direction, either pivot or add, right? Add a your your portfolio.
Yeah, so corporate partnership is actually really helpful, because when you, let's say, Zero Cow Factory is always a technology company, right? So, but end product is a food product. So even food, dairy, CPG, nutraceutical, this kind of a companies, right? They have the stronger brand, right? So we are a B2B ingredient company, and they can help with a strong brand and the consumer presence, that they can easily build the consumer trust. If Nestle, let's say for an example, Danone, right? If they are launching a product, right, and they are using our protein, so that's always help in terms of getting corporate partnership. But there are a couple of challenges. Now talk about India, let's say. In India, the traditional dairy companies who operate at a larger scale also, there are many, right? But they don't have any vision with respect to technology or replacing, let's say, animals or anything. Even they don't understand today that how many proteins are there in a milk as a dairy company. Their R&D is still limited for last 100 years with respect to milk comes from first from the cow, let's say, right? And they are creating dairy products, right? So there is absolutely in India context, not many food companies are ready with respect to the stronger plan with in sustainability point of view, or getting into adoption of precision fermentation, or getting into the cellular agriculture, because it's a multi-million dollar business for them, right? It's a cash cow. They're already getting a huge business, established business by selling traditional milk or the dairy product, for an example. So there is no need, I've seen, especially from the Indian companies, who have special focus or special team, right, to evaluate or getting into the partnership with the Indian companies. So that's really a big problem in India looking at this large food and CPG company, because their priority is not there at the moment of time. Correct. If they are coming up, it is really easy for developing this sector, right, at a scale in India. For an example, Amul, Nandini, or even Britannia, let's say ITC, such names comes, right, if they launch certain products or they have the plan. But absolutely, that's unfortunately, maybe in the near future we'll see, but not today. This company doesn't have any clear pathway. But if you look at, I told you the Milky Better program, which we did using Pascual Dairy in the Spain, right? So their vision is future point of view to replace the cow-free, basically milk, right? So outside India, if you look at these companies in food space, they have very clear roadmap. They started already creating, I mean, their own innovation team, right? And they are also started investing in the startup or getting some early partnership interest, basically, and which we have seen, right? Perfect Day, if you look at, they have done with the Nestle, same thing, then General Mills, right? And few things are, a few products in the dairy, especially in the US, are already available for the consumers. It is not the Perfect Day or the startup who are the selling as a B2C brand, but these large companies are helping them to use their brand and the collaborations. So these are the companies definitely help us, but unfortunately today the kind of a maturity which at least I have seen is not Indian food companies but outside. And also these companies are not on a priority today. I mean, in terms of the regulatory is a big hurdle, right? So a lot of food and dairy companies at a large scale are available in the Europe, for an example, but European food regulatory process is anything between 3 to 4 years minimum to get the novel food approval, and they did not approve even single company today. Even FDA grants approval, there are so many startups and products are there in the already in US and even Singapore and all. But Europe regulator is really difficult at the moment of time. So these companies generally, if you look at, they operate from the largely European markets, right? So they are interested, but they are not able to cater their primary market. So as a startup, we can't wait because they are not in hurry, because until regulatory hurdle is still there, right, even they will not able to sell their product. And today if you apply to the European food regulatory, that is EFSA, average time is anyhow between about 4 years, which is a very long time. And they did not approve the same products which already got approval by US FDA. It is absolutely safe with respect to genetic modification or anything with respect to allergy toxicology, FDA approved, or even Singapore Food Agency has approved, right? But certain countries and the geography like Europe, where these I mean, companies are primarily targeting their markets, so they are not in hurry. So this is again a big problem, and these companies are willing to get into collaborations once you have any ingredient or anything you are working at a scale, and also with the regulatory approval.
So I just maybe you want to jump into the example that you mentioned, right? Your Perfect Day. So let's knowing that your Perfect Day has you have started manufacturing in India or gotten approvals to manufacture in India, right? Or you have set up the manufacturing. I want you to probably um, make a guess or a wish. So what does that do for your for the space in India? Either a guess or a wish.
So Perfect Day, so they got the first approval basically, and that this is what happening. If Indian companies are not doing it, some companies from West generally they raise a huge money approval and they operate the scale. And they got the approval for the beta lactoglobulin, which is one of the first animal-free whey protein, right? So, and this is what the FSSI who have approved product, right? So now they can manufacture and they can sell the products in India as well. But I don't think they have the immediate plans or anything where they have launched anything in India at the moment of time. But largely they are in the US and Singapore at the moment with respect to products are already in the shelf for the consumers. But they got the approval, like you said, for India to sell. But that is again, I mean, one of the kind of a whey protein, one type beta lactoglobulin.
Mm. But I'm assuming that should also be taken with a level of your positivity because there is at least one regulatory approval now in place, right? For some precedents to be set.
Yeah.
Do you see that from a regulatory perspective that you're speeding things up for Indian companies, you're probably going forward?
Yeah, but I think if you look at, there are very much limited players who have done. So if you look at milk, also there are six major proteins, right? But they are able to scale or market or getting the regulatory approval for only just one type of protein, and that is also within the whey family. Casein is most demanding and difficult protein where we haven't seen any global approval yet. Correct. From supply point of view, regulatory point of view, getting the technology breakthrough for the demanding protein or any ingredient is still companies are able to face a lot of technical challenges. And to get that scale up using bioreactors or at a larger scale is again a huge challenge because you need a huge capital also with respect to getting that scale. Correct. So I think one or two examples will not help us. We need a lot of more players at a commercial scale, getting regulatory approvals and getting the products in the market. But which we have seen even large companies who have raised a lot of money, but still they are struggling. So like a perfect day for an example, just you mentioned that, right? They've raised almost $750 million, but they are able to scale only one protein.
Mm,
Correct.
mm,
So these things are very difficult. If you look at India as a country, right, to raise certain things for the R&D or getting into market or regulatory point of view, right? Getting even $1 million is also very difficult in India, right? So these companies have raised so much of money to reach a certain stage. So I don't know, capital is not everything, but there is also limitation with respect to technology because it's a discovery for a lot of startups to get that breakthrough and getting your own IP patents, right? And getting that scale with respect to continuously raising funds. So there are multiple problems today with respect to this space that not many companies are able to scale.
yeah. So on that topic, there is a question from the audience. It's like, in relation to your recent fundraise, how do you plan to maintain the capital runway till your next round, considering that your fermentation is so capex heavy?
Yes, I think very good question. So as I mentioned, this space where you need to raise continuously, right? Even you should be very clear that next 3 years, next 5 years, right? How much capital you will be needing at that moment of time. Fundraising is a not easy job, right? And getting into India also fundraising takes a time, right? When you are talking to any VCs, right? Due diligence, SHA, SSA, right? This legal documentation can take at least 6 months or up to 1 year also. So it's a very long, time that. So if you're planning fundraising, you should be very clear to create a pipeline, right? Investor discussions as early as possible, right? Even if you're not raising currently, right? If you're planning for the next year, right? Or waiting for certain stage to achieve, right? In terms of maybe a technology advancement or something. But as a founder, I think most of the time should go to raise first check because it is not easy because you will get a lot of no rather than yes. Correct. So even for us also to scale up as a precision fermentation is high capital, right? But if you look at the advantage being in India is that now a lot of companies in this space, not a lot of, but few players who have raised multi-million dollars around, right? At least more than $100 million. Uh, and they got some approval also, let's say, right? And few products in the market. But these are the larger, they are doing fermentation, precision fermentation, let's say, especially in the US or Singapore, where this is not a manufacturing hub basically, right? Because food, if you look at food, is a high volume and low price game. It is not the pharma or the biotech products where low volume, where if you have the low yield, and that is fine, and you can sell at a large, high cost also, right? So food is very different, challenging space today for scale up because you need a high volume and a reduction in the price. Then only I think consumer will easily adopt such product, right? So now the thing is that India and China kind of a country has a always advantage with respect to CDMO with bioreactors. Correct. So a lot of companies are moving to India, China, Thailand to get the scale up because the US and the Europe is not a manufacturing hub, right, to produce certain things at a low cost. So India has a big advantage, which we have seen even COVID time, right? A lot of vaccine production at a low cost, at a scale, right? So India is not doing much innovation or IP creation, but we are always have built a expertise in terms of the outsourcing at a low cost manufacturing or CMO, CDMO services with respect to anything in bioreactors, right? So that's how we have the advantage to be in India, where certain cost of, let's say, protein production in the US or any developed country, we can produce at least one tenth cost in India. So that is always an advantage, because bioreactors, if you look at which we have also built some assembly and all in here in India, which has a really low cost compared to outside India. So it's
Mm,
massive, I mean, difference in terms of advantage to get scale up in India with respect to capex investment.
right. So maybe you're touching upon one of the things that you mentioned, right? Which is a lot of investors saying no. I'm sure in your own your journey, you would have had your multiple either failed negotiations or not being able to convince your many investors to maybe look at your organization the way you want them to look at it, right? How do you handle it? What, like, I know that many times no can sometimes end up being a little difficult to absorb or take initially, right? How do you manage that either within for yourself in isolation or within the team? How does that work? How has that worked for you?
So see, fundraising is always difficult, right? Because less than 1% startups actually backed by the investor, right? That's the truth. And even if it is a new space like alternative protein, it is more difficult, because there are not much investors who understand this space, or they have the thesis, or they can wait for the longer period of time. So always it is, even if you are building other than alternative protein startup, it is always difficult, right? You should be within the 1%, right, of the startup. And especially if you are in this alternative protein space, right? How you are different to get that your technical advantage or your moat, that is more important, because then in this space, I think if you are not in 0.1% of the startup in this space, you will not get funded. Because the challenge is that, as I told you, right, you should be investable as a startup. What investors are looking at in India is largely still not this space. They are not ready to write a big check for the research space, right? So even first questions will come, even if you are raising 1 CR today in India, without revenue and the user matrix or some tractions, they are not willing to even discuss with you. Correct. So we will give you a fund for the research, because it's a high risky uh, elements for them also, right, to get out of it as a return after certain years. So if they don't understand this space, they will not invest. As simple as that, right? But as I mentioned, that we have made ourselves where to make ourselves the investable, right? And how do we can generate the interest, right? So few deep tech VCs who invest in research, right, to certain extent, or they have certain relevance. We help them to understand what our vision is, right? What is the short term plan, long term plan? What is the exit plan we can give it to them, right? How strong our technology, how different moat we have created, how many IPs and the patents which we have, right? So that can create a huge impact of the understanding that even though in alternative protein space, commercialization is still a way to go. Correct. Because the lab scale journey is really long, right? To get into the technology and all, right? So end of the day, as a founders, we need to think that can someone acquire us at R&D stage also, right? But how? Because someone will acquire, then only the investor will make money through exit, right? So let's not think much about initial days on commercialization or IPO, because that is very rare in this space, right? But we have seen the traction where if you are building a right technology, you have a lot of patterns and the IP and the defensibility. There are startups in this space started getting acquired, largely outside India, which we have seen, right? So it's a very successful deal for the startup founders and also the investors. Because at the end of the day, how the investors are getting exit is very much important. But if as a founder, you are able to convince them with your really clear vision and the roadmap that even we are not able to scale up, even though we will not able to get a single revenue or single approval regulatory, right? But there is a strong your technology pathway which can build a confidence in that, that yes, this is a real deep tech startup, and they will not, because investor job is end of the day to find the right horses and to invest. Their job is to invest, right? So how you are making yourself that investor should see that you are as a startup but investable for them, correct, and where they can clearly see their exit path, although you are not able to commercialize or getting a revenue in next 5-10 years also, right? So that is what I think the maturity of the founders with respect to their technical roadmap creates a huge impact. And as I told you, right, so this building a thesis for Indian fund is really difficult job. So we have spent more than 3 to 6 months, right, with them to get their confidence building, their lot of queries, to understand that how we are different, what technology we are doing, right? How many IPs we have already created, how many IP positioning strategy we have, right? Because here you need to see very differently that sales strategy, marketing strategy is out of question. More importantly, you need to prove yourself as a deep tech startup, right? What is your IP strategy? How you are different, right? If someone is building a product tomorrow, right, they should take at least 3 to 4 years time, correct? So how you are creating that defensibility among your roadmap, that is very much important, and that's how we even raise uh, funding. It is difficult, but I don't think it is impossible.
So there is a person who has put up a yeah, question on chat. If you could, you probably raise your hand. We could add you, and you could ask the your question yourself. But before that, I just wanted to stick with the investment aspect of it, right? So when you converted your investment right now, right? I think a couple of months back, or 3-4 months back, right? Yeah, what changed? So all the experiences that you've had in the past of either investors saying no, was there any learning from all the no's that you've heard that added or that changed something the way you presented your idea or you projected your idea to the investors who said yes?
Yeah, so few things with respect to rejections, discussions, right? Or getting into discussion with the investors. So few things are very clear that uh, fundraising is in today's time is not easy, right? There is capital is also available, but I think investors are also very choosy nowadays, correct? And main thing is the technology. If you don't have any technology play, forget about investment. You will not get it simply. So if you ask me my personal experience, and I think there are question also plant-based, right? So we need to compare not India, right? We need to compare ourselves with the global. So even plant-based is very nascent in India. But if you look at Oatly kind of a company or the plant-based industry, if you look at the plant-based milk is almost 30% in the US, right? So that is what the market share India is not even 1%. So what you are building is just not ki I am selling oat milk in India and I will create $1 billion company. No, you will not get funded most of the time because you need to compare yourself with the startups who are operating in this space at a global scale, and you need to make yourself different. And without technology play, it is very difficult. Even though a lot of startups in India who have started, and I personally know that plant-based companies or the startups in India are not able to raise. The reason, there is not much science or the technology where you can give the multi-valuation return to the investors in a shorter period of time, correct? Because in the plant based you don't have any much with respect to IP or the patents, right? Strong IP or the patents, because if you are working on some protein or something also from plant, lettuce or anything basically, right, someone can easily copy and create a much better brand. So I have seen that plant-based startups are actually dying, or there is a decline in terms of the growth, or also not much. They have able to scale, or there are not investors who really wanted to back with the larger checks, right? So plant-based is straight no today with lot of funds in India and outside also, because there is no technology which the investors generally look after for any technology advantage and the moat in the long run. So it's been always challenging, but I think technology should be the everything to convince your roadmap or raising your funds, right? And also alternate protein, which we have seen, it's all about strong IP creation at the moment of time. Because when uncertainties with respect to, let's say, your regulatory hurdles or getting the scale up and all, right, then it is only important to focus on how strong you are building your technology, how strong you are protecting the IP, so that tomorrow can big company, biotech company, food companies, right? They can come and right. So you need to create yourself as an opportunity. So, and that is only possible if you focus on largely on the tech.
So there is one question here, which is more on your product, right? So what is your status on the market launch? Apart from milk, are you looking at any other products or either in pipeline or that has already been developed?
So first thing is that we need to really understand the science here rather than the food. So milk, animal-free milk is absolutely impossible today. Okay, because the technology or the science has to discover a lot of things. So today, if you look at the precision fermentation, you will not able to create a milk, number one. So understanding of the science is more important, and that's how the companies are focused on ingredients like a protein. Okay, so there are also, let's say, majorly four types of casein. Let's say if you consider the milk, the question is two types of whey, right? So six major proteins. Then there's a fat, micronutrients, calcium, right? And largely in 1 liter of milk, also 90% is water, but there are multiple ingredients which require to formulate a milk. So technically, you should be very clear that today it is not possible to create a milk. Or if you think, "Yeah, I will create a milk," you need to double check that, because that science haven't proved yet certain things. Just to express casein using microorganism is a really big challenge, industry challenge, right? So let's not target about end product, right, as a milk or something, right? Because even if you target certain ingredients, it's a huge business. Because ingredient, because let's say for protein is required everywhere, right? Food, non-food, right? A lot of industrial use cases, right? So take one problem statement or even smaller thing, but create a very strong tech and scale up that particular thing, so that you need not create a, let's say, cell-based meat or maybe a entire milk or the cheese. It is not required, because certain things today is not possible through science. So a lot of times the companies are taking the hybrid approach, because animal free fat is a big challenge today. Let's say for an example, right, getting into the, let's say, precision fermentation, maybe 5-10 years down the line we will see some more innovation and some more tractions, right? So today I think a lot of companies global scale, they are taking hybrid approach also. So they take, let's say for an example, plant-based fat, okay, which is available, and they use the precision fermented, let's say, proteins to create that hybrid experience. Because certain things to prove at a lab scale is also very challenging at the moment of time.
So one, probably last year question from my end, which is more to do with, again, your organization and the your talent part of it, right? That your talent and the hiring. Since you mentioned that you are extremely keen in you're continuing to be in India or to be located in India, how have you gone about your finding talent, hiring talent? Uh, maybe also you talk us here through that a bit.
Yeah, sure. I think very good question, because getting the talent in alternative protein space is a big challenge, especially in India, because honestly there is no education. right? Or relevance with respect to what we are building, right? Food space is very nascent, new thing, and kind of a certain proteins which we are working is even more challenging, right? First time someone is doing. So talent, absolutely, we are very clear that if there is no education, we will not get a right relevance or the right skill at a first place, right? Even experienced folks who have worked in largely pharma, biotech space, right? In the enzyme or non-food part, right? With even 20, 30 years, they are not able to perform with respect to what we are building. So it's a huge challenge. So here, I think how someone is taking that challenge, right, to get uh, ownership and get the job done. So experience and the talent doesn't work here. So we are generally focused on getting some similar complementary skills in the space, let's say for particular technical profile, let's say for the fermentation, right? So someone who have this certain experience on the certain strains, let's say for an example, or precision fermentation, right? But for them also, they take around 1 or 2 months just to understand the problem statement or the technology which we are developing, right? So we need to get with a lot of handholding because someone is coming from industry, they will not able to perform on a day one. It is very clear. So a lot of handholding is required, and that is also certain months is required before getting into the labs to perform. So talent is a huge challenge, and I can see India is facing a lot of challenges if someone is working in the food space, especially precision fermentation or cell based. But outside India, a lot of companies are moving R&D because of this reason, especially in the US, Singapore, and the Israel, at least from R&D point of view, because uh, they have at least better talent pool in terms of this space and the maturity. But talent is always difficult in India. Even today, we are hiring a lot of folks, and we have about 4 deep tech team across different uh, areas, right? Which is required to build product. But direct skills is absolutely no. We don't get direct skill, but complementary skills or some relevance or someone is having the larger risk appetite, right? To take
Mm.
certain challenges to perform, and that's how we are operating at the moment of time.
And I think there is a question which has come in, which is what other talent are you looking to hire apart from bioprocess experts and strain engineers?
Okay, so I can tell you honestly, based on our experience, if you're really looking for some mentors or advisor in this space, no, someone will say, but there are no mentors or the advisors are available technically. At least when you talk about bioprocess or strain engineering, you have to create yourself in-house expertise, or you should be your own mentor or advisor. Because I can tell you certain strains, for an example, filamentous fungal system, which is new generation microorganism. There is absolutely no work has been done in India. You will find a lot of PhD, postdoc, or some experienced folks also in India or even globally. But certain strains which is required, we don't have choice with respect to getting the large volume out of
Mm.
certain new generation microorganism, where you we don't have any expertise, right? So don't look after for some experts or the mentors, because you will waste your time and you will not able to get, because they haven't worked on that space, right? So getting that, building that expertise is only in house. Getting from the scratch is only way.
No, so I think the your question was what other talent are you looking for apart from these two?
Bioprocess and strain engineers. So these are the core two things, because the strain engineering is the first part, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
sometimes what happens is you have the recombinant clone as a positive clone, but what if it is not expressing at all?
Mm.
Because when we talk about the food, we are talking about the double, triple digit of the yield, right? Per liter of fermenter, right? So that is what the 10 minimum. So certain microorganism as a first step, strain engineering is a core part, because then the fermentation, bioprocess fermentation is still sorted out, because you will find some relevant skills and the folks, right? But apart from that, I think today the industry challenge is the DSP. Okay, that comes after the bioprocess, fermentation upstream basic. So downstream process, which I'm talking about, let's say purification of the ingredient, protein or anything, right? Which is not easy because what happens is technically there is a challenge is that there are some resins or the chromatography methods which are used largely in the pharma space today. But this is very expensive for scaling up the food processes. So there is no choice to get into the chromatography methods. But when you think about non-chromatography methods like ultrafiltration and all, so that is the big industry challenge today. Even from regulatory aspect also, if you have the host DNA in your end product, right, after purification, then also it is very difficult to get the regulatory approval. So strain engineering is a basic first important part. Then you have the bioprocess upstream, that is the fermentation, and then downstream is the third, and the fourth is generally formulation of food product. So that's how we look at four different areas.
Yeah, perfect. So I think we'll go to the last question that's there for you, which
Okay.
is to provide any problem statement that you think would help your students, which could potentially become your talent pool later, right? To
Uh,
explore in this space.
yeah, so see, yeah, we are hiring also a lot of folks, right, who wanted to work in this space, right? So even we hire a lot of freshers also because we know even we don't get a right resource even after experience. So uh, uh, so a lot of times what when there is no data, no protocol, no standard things are available, we need to create everything from the scratch. Right. And that is definitely fun, but it's opportunity, right, to create that technology. And we always proud, ki, okay, we have built this, right? Maybe a,
So,
uh,
so
uh,
your students who are looking to do you probably get into the space, right? How do they go about doing this?
so first thing is that no, there are not much players in this space, right? So if you have right plan for getting into this space to start your career, we hire even freshers without any experience.
Mm.
Okay, because more important thing is someone is actually maybe on a personal interest or wanted to work in some innovation field, right? Largely, and not in copy post paste kind of a job. And the real innovation in the longer run, students can actually get into some understanding of the technical is very much important. And if student is coming from some engineering background or maybe food science or biotech, right? But still, they will not have much understanding about this space because in their education, unfortunately, certain things are not there. For an example, precision fermentation, right? What we do. So in case I think they need to really get into the what is their interest, okay, which company or the kind of a work they wanted to start right away from building their career. And in case someone is interested, they can apply to us. We evaluate, and even though freshers also, we don't mind to hire because we understand young blood can take a more challenge and right startup is all about young talent and they how much risk you are able to take and getting into real innovation because experienced folks we had so far okay experience because they are not coming out of their comfort zone most of the time when they move with a larger experience and they when they move to the startup there are a lot of different challenges but startups the freshers basically they have the everything is learning for them, right? So they can pick anything, right? They can work hard and they can prove themselves.
So I'm just being also you're cautious of your time. Um, any last words that I mean, I know that you mentioned that we need far more players in the market, a lot more your startups, you're trying to do what we're trying to do right now, right? Um, in a room full of, you're filled with your startups who are you trying to make it? Any last words that you have for them?
Startups working in this space, I think you need to be really innovative. And if you're looking to raise capital, even in the near future or after that, you need capital, right? Because startup is all about agile way of always the growth, right? So if big companies is doing 10 years, we generally do in 1 year. right? So it's always aggressive plans across everything, product development, technology development, getting into the market, right? And that is not possible many times if you don't have the right investors, right? So if startup is getting into, I think, focus on two things, that if you are really solving the right problem, and the solution, basically how you are different from the competitors or getting in the tech play. So even I told you, right, plant-based thing is declining as an industry, and also not much with respect to investment raising activities. So whatever you do, basically, you should be very clear that technology will only play a big role to uh, make startup different than the crowd, correct? If it is the growth, it is IP creation, raising capital, everything. But I think more focus should be on the tech, at least for next initial 3 4 years, right? If you are sorting out your technology, and then I think things are easy for getting commercialization or even regulatory approvals, right? But first step is very critical, because everything is here rocket science.
On that note, yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time out and having this your conversation with us, Sohil. Um, I really do wish the very best of luck in going forward, and really hope that you hit the market extremely soon. And for the audience that we have here, yeah, thanks a lot for your joining in. I really hope that this conversation has added a little more insight into how you need to build up your organization from here on. On that note,
Yes.
all right, thanks a lot, all of you, and yeah, have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you,
Sure. Thank you,
everyone.
Siddharth and GFI and all of you. Thanks a lot.